computer. Hello, everybody. I am Len Leatherwood, and I am the president of Story Circle Network, and I am delighted today to have our Sarton winners and our Gilda winner with us for a panel discussion so that we all benefit from what they've learned and what they've experienced writing these award-winning indie books. And welcome, everybody. I'm so pleased you're here. So thank you for being here. I would love it. And I think some of you already know, if you wouldn't mind just putting in where you're sitting right now, what state, what town. So we have we have some places I've never even seen: Everett, Washington, and Poulsby, Washington, and Oakland, California, San Luis Obispo. We've got people from Williamsburg. Wow. Okay. Houston, Chattanooga, Mountain View, California. So we've got a lot of folks here, and we have a really large number of people who have signed up for this. So we have at least 75. So that's extremely exciting. And our other goal will be that we will air this at our virtual conference in September as well. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is I want to let you know Story Circle Network is in case some of you don't know what Story Circle Network is an organization that honors women telling their stories. And that's in any form. That could be from fiction, nonfiction, poetry, screenwriting. It could be in any form, memoir. And it is a wonderful organization that I'm extremely proud to be involved in. I've been involved since 2008. And if you're not already a member, I certainly hope that you will consider becoming a member. The Sarton Awards, as well as the Gilda, they're kind of we are so proud of them. This is kind of our flagship enterprise for Story Circle Network. It takes, a village is an understatement of how many people it takes to actually process the many, many submissions we get and go through this vetting process. This is not a casual sort of off the cuff thing. It is there are rubrics for every category and readers in every category. And then it goes out after it's been read several times. Then it goes to independent librarians who do the final judging. So I think you all can be extremely proud of yourselves that you are sitting here today, because this is a big thing. This is a very, very very fine honor. So I'm just so pleased for all of you. So the Gilda is based on humor. It's a Gilda Radner. We based this award on her because we wanted to honor humor as well. And then the other categories are contemporary fiction, memoir, historical fiction, nonfiction, the Gilda. And then we have a special recognition category as well. And unfortunately, that author is not here today. Her name is Becca Anderson. Hi, Becca. We're sorry you're not here. Her book is The Book of Awesome Girls, Why the Future is Female. Mm. And so she received special recognition for that book. Again, quite an honor. So now I'm going to we're going to go through the process will be that we're going to let everybody introduce themselves and their book. And then I have a series of questions that people will answer. Everybody selected certain questions. And then at that point, we will go to a Q&A, but the Q&A will be on through the chat box. And so during the time, if somebody is speaking and you have a question for them, you can just write it right in the chat box. And Liz, who is our program director, will be curating those questions for after everybody speaks. Okay. All right. So, and then Liz just put to learn more about the Sarton and Gilda Awards. There is a link. Okay. All right. So how about Susan Twite? Would you be willing to kick it off for us?
Absolutely. Although I was hoping you'd pick Marita because she's the best dressed, I think. But anyway, also she's smart enough to have her book cover right behind her.
Very smart.
Even
yes.
think about, because I'm in Western Wyoming working at a guest ranch in the mountains. I'm Susan Twite. I am a biologist first. I'm a plant nerd, but I've been a freelance writer for 35 years. And the book I won the Sarton Award for memoir for, Bless the Birds, Living with Love in a Time of Dying, which is a love story about living as our best people at the end of our lives and in any really super hard time, like, right now, with all of the gun violence and the war in Ukraine and Black Lives Matter and everything else that's going wrong, climate change in our country. The story is about how we can be our best when the times are hardest. And it was not an easy book to write or to live through the story either. I'm talking to you from high in the mountains in Western Wyoming, my homeland, and I'm wearing my very best cowboy shirt with all of it snapped. So that's me.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome from Wyoming. We really appreciate you taking time. And I know you're a horsewoman and that you are a cowgirl and that those snaps mean something for you. Okay. Let's go on to Marita. Would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here tonight in the presence of these lovely, talented winners, co-winners, and I won the nonfiction award for my book, The Strong Black Woman, How a Myth Endangers the Physical and Mental Health of Black Women. And it's a book that looks at a kind of deeply embedded cultural belief in the Black community that on the one hand has very positive aspects, but also has a deep, dark underside that more and more women are currently interrogating and working to dismantle because of the negative impact of this belief that we have to be strong all the time on our mental and our physical health. And I live outside Washington, D.C. in Prince George's County.
Very good. Very good. That sounds like a fascinating book and very timely. Clearly. So welcome, Marita. We're happy you're here. Barbara, would you like to go next?
Sure. I actually brought my book. See, here it is.
Beautiful cover.
It is. She Writes does the best covers. So I was honored to win the Sarton for Contemporary Fiction for my second novel. Do I get to say that I was a finalist last year for my first novel, Queen of the Owls? So it's a special thrill to be the awardee this year. So The Sound Between the Notes is the story of a woman who is a pianist and had renounced her career to be a mother because of her own history as an adoptee. And she's given a second chance that she never expected. So it's really the story about how do you do right by those you love while also doing right by yourself and fulfilling your own passion. She's searching for who she is, where she belongs. What does it mean to be a mother, to have a mother? Lots of stuff like that. And just to be transparent, I am what they call a serious amateur pianist. I am nowhere near as good as Susanna, but I do study piano and I'm also a mother by adoption. So I was able to dig into my own life, draw upon all of that. But what's kind of cool about the book is that the story is seen through the eyes of a musician. It's how Susanna sees the world and relates to what happens to her. So anyway, I'm super passionate about this book and I'm so excited to be here with all of you.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. And I'm excited to hear more about the process with each of these books. It's going to be, and it's interesting to me, Barbara, that you're writing as someone who is kind of an amateur musician, but you tackled the mind of a accomplished musician. I think that's interesting. And
I'll talk about that
and
later.
you're going to talk about that. I certainly hope so. Okay, Kathleen, how about you?
Hi, well, it seems really appropriate that I'm following Barbara because I'm also an amateur musician, but I was a British literature professor for 30 years. So I published a lot of other stuff prior to this. I won for Vindicated, a novel of Mary Shelley, the May Sarton Award in historical fiction. And most people know about Mary Shelley as the author of the first science fiction novel, Frankenstein. Although I just met a man last week who said to me, did she really write that novel, or did Percy write it? And I said, yes, she wrote it, and she wrote it when she was 18. And by the way, she wrote a lot of other works, including 7 novels. She was an editor of her husband's poetry. She was a translator, but she was also a lot of other things. She was a mother who lost 4 of her 5 children.
Oh.
She was a daughter of a mother who died 11 days after Mary was born. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, the British feminist who wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Women. She was a rebel who ran away with a married man. She ran away with Percy Shelley while he was still married to Harriet Westbrook. She was a daughter whose father rejected her after she ran away with Percy Shelley. She was a sister to Fanny, who committed suicide.
Yeah.
And she was a widow after Percy died at the age of 29 in a sailing accident. So I wrote this novel in Mary Shelley's voice after she reads her mother's memoir that her father forbade her to write.
Wow.
And I had read Percy and Mary's joint travel narrative, and I was so dissatisfied with it because all they wrote in their narrative, in their journal, was about where they traveled to and the books that they read. And I thought, what about the interior life? I want to know about the interior life. So that's what I wrote as a personal journal. And my goal was to allow the reader to know that all along the way, she's guided by her mother, who is a philosopher and a feminist, and by her father, who wanted her to become a philosopher. So despite all of her adversity, she lived by her pen, and she overcame so much through her writing. So it's a story of resilience and courage and tenacity. And I think she's a great role model for every woman writer.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I can't wait to read that book. Oh my goodness. That sounds really, really good. Let me stop I'm actually timing everybody. So if you wonder why I'm looking at her, but all's well, we're doing well. Okay. No, that sounds really fascinating. Michelle is our Gilda Award winner. So Michelle, you're not required to say anything funny, because I realize I'm sure that's a little pressure on you, but
it may slip out. So I am so humbled and honored to be here with you with this great collection of marvelous women writers, authors, and I love all that you have tackled and approach in your work, and I'm so appreciative of being with you tonight, and hopefully we have an opportunity to intersect our writing lives and our lives in person at some point. So I am an author of 6 books. My latest is Act Like You're Having a Good Time, which I won the Gilda Radner Award for humor, and I'm exceptionally grateful. And I've been a journalist for about 40 something years. And I also am emerita faculty at Northwestern University, where I taught journalism for 18 years. And I am a senior leader with the Op-Ed Project. And I lead and mentor academics and activists there was my earring. That was funny. All over the world.
Well, you made us smile. That's for sure.
To inspire them to write op-eds and give TED Talks and get their ideas in the world. So that's also very inspiring work. And I have a very corny, I don't know if it's hilariously funny, but story about launching into my writing life. I had my own newspaper when I was 10. It was called the Juvenile Journal. And I wrote, and I typed it up. It was a 4-page newsletter mailed to 50 subscribers who were all family members or neighbors that my parents coerced. And it was monthly, and it was essays, and I filled it with illustrations and news of our family. And I'm the youngest of 6 and 7 years, so there was a lot going on. And then I thought I was so special. I said to my father when I was about a year into the process, that I said, I'm doing really well. And, I got an empire and there's a paywall, although he didn't know the words for paywall. And he said, actually, you're not. You have never paid me a dime for postage, nor ink, nor the copying machine. It was a hectograph, if you remember those, with the gel and you put the carbon down. And anyway, so hopefully I'm a better writer than an entrepreneur, and I am looking forward to tonight. So thank you.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Well, you have succeeded in making us all giggle just at the get-go. So we're off to a good start. Okay, so the first question, and this is going to be Barbara, Kathleen, and Susan. Please describe your writing process. So why don't we start with Kathleen?
Sure. Okay. Well, since I write historical fiction, my process begins with a lot of research. And in this particular case, I read a ton of stuff or reread a lot of things. I started with Muriel Sparks, who's a novelist, her biography of Mary Shelley called A Child of Light. I reread Frankenstein. I read Mary Shelley's other novels, all of them. I reread Percy's poetry, her father's memoir of Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Wollstonecraft's fiction, and her other works, Vindication, Thoughts on the Education of Daughters, and as I said, the joint journals. And while I was a professor, I had great opportunities to travel and teach abroad. So along the way, of course, I traveled to London several times and Oxford, but I also was able to visit Rome, Florence, Pompeii, where some of my novels set. So I had that firsthand experience of being in those places, being at the Trevi Fountain, or being in Florence, and just being able to draw on that in my memory as I was writing. I actually visited the Keats Shelley Museum in Rome near the Spanish Steps, and that's in the building where John Keats died, actually. But I visited that, and there were a bunch of Italian children there getting quizzed about everything about Percy Shelley and Keats. And they have a jawbone supposedly of Percy Shelley. He was burned on the beach after his boating accident. They cremated him right there, and a friend of his, Ronnie, grabbed the jawbone and his heart, supposedly. So they have his heart and some of his hair. So with my experience and with all the research that I did, I created this timeline of events, and then I began to imagine gaps in that history and that timeline, and that's the fictional part of the narrative. I saw that somebody asked about, why did I decide to write this? I have another confession. I used to be a nurse. I was a registered nurse for 12 years before I got my PhD in English. And I worked in OB-GYN. I was labor and delivery nurse. And I had read when I was a graduate student in English in the memoir that William Godwin wrote after Mary Wollstonecraft died, that she had died of a retained placenta. And she developed blood poisoning. So she had septicemia. And at any rate, the weirdest thing in that memoir was that they brought puppies in to nurse her breasts rather than her own child. So she never got to be with her child. So that's the way I started thinking about this. I wanted to explore what was going on as she's laying there dying, and what she might have been thinking, and what William Godwin was thinking. And so I wrote that in alternating voices, and that became the prologue to the novel.
Wow.
So, and then after that, I expanded, and I have Mary reading her mother's memoir, that Forbidden Knowledge, and going from there. So beyond that, I don't know that my process is any different from anyone else's. I have a scheduled writing time. I do that, and then I play music later in the day. So I kind of set aside time to write. I always know where I'm going to start again once I finish for the day. And that was true when I wrote my scholarly books as well. I always had here is where I'm going to start. I always keep a kind of day journal so that I know the things that occur to me, I wake up and, oh, maybe I should be thinking about this, or,
Mhm.
and I have to write it down because I'm, yeah, I'm getting old. At any rate, I keep that. So I journal about ideas and questions that I have. I write many, 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 many drafts, and I always revise what I just wrote the day before. And that sounds weird, but I do that because I remind myself of where I was and what I was doing.
Mhm.
I have been in the habit of always reading aloud what I've written, because then I hear mistakes or I hear where things are not clear, and revise again, always with the idea of developing scenes and so forth. I have trusted readers, and my trusted readers didn't read this particular novel because, at any rate, I had taught in Illinois, and I moved back to Iowa City, where I had lived for 22 years. And I was able to get into a writing group with one of my former grad school colleagues. And it's the Creative Girls Writing Group, and they're so amazing. And many of them are graduates of the Iowa Writers Workshop. So they're just the best. They are gentle, but they always ask for more. They ask many questions. They move forward with ideas about other things to do and further development. So they've been working with me. I have 2 other novels that I've written since Vindicated, and I've been working with them quite a bit. So at any rate, no one read this novel before I sent it off.
Oh, wow.
To the press. It was just me.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but I'll just finish with this. It's really interesting to me that when I first sent this out, I got a response from an agent who is also an academic, and she said, "We don't need any more novels about Mary Shelley."
Oh, boy.
So I thought that was interesting, but I ended up working, and I can talk about this later, with a really great small press, and with an editor and publisher who are just amazing. So that's my
Wonderful, wonderful.
process.
And I would I'm going to ask the one question that I actually even wrote in the chat, just in case. How long did your research take?
Oh my goodness. Well, I started writing this while I was still teaching, and I was chair of the English department at Northern Illinois University. And I don't know, I mean, probably the research was a couple of years because I was still doing other stuff. And I really just wanted to read that Muriel Sparks biography. I'd never had time to read it. And so I kind of started with that. Yeah.
It became a, it just started,
Yeah.
it had its own momentum, it sounds like.
Right.
Very good, very good. Thank you. That's fascinating. So interesting that the spark for the story came from your experience as a nurse.
Absolutely.
From an earlier.
That was really a dumb idea that they had.
Yeah, really. No kidding. Anyway, but it just shows where these ideas can come from, right? Barbara, yes. Would you like to go next? Well, since yours fiction too, and then Susan will go over to you. Yeah. Okay.
It's a perfect segue because I was thinking that I would just hit on 4 aspects of the process, because I could talk about the process for the entire hour. And the very first one is the spark. So how's that? We could have planned that, right? So absolutely, as always, if I don't have a spark, I can't. So that I remember the moment when this book actually was born. I had recently gone back to studying piano after many years away from it. And I was doing something in the mirror with makeup or something. And my hand felt very stiff. And I remember thinking, oh no, of all times, not now, not when I've just rediscovered this. My hand is fine. But that, oh no, what if moment was actually when the story was born. It was very clear. So what happens for me as a novelist is that from the spark, I would say that the next stage, I'll call it the magnet, which is that other ideas start being attracted to this core and lots of other themes. And I'll just give you one example. I had one of the motifs that I was playing with was that this was a story of a woman who'd been adopted, because I wanted to explore motherhood and family and belonging. And so I thought, okay, so she's got something wrong with her hand. So what's a hand disease that would be hereditary? So I was literally sitting on the train going into Manhattan, and I Googled on my laptop, hereditary disease that messes up your hand. And it popped up with Dupuytren's. So like, that was amazing. And so then I'm thinking, okay, so she's got this hereditary disease, that's her connection. I'm thinking, well, I wonder if there's any pianists who've had Dupuytren's. So I Google famous classical pianist Dupuytren's. Bingo, Misha Dichter. So what did I do? I wrote to his agent and explained what I was interested in. I also used to be a researcher and academic too, so we have that in common, Kathleen. So lo and behold, I'm sitting at my desk and my phone rings. I pick it. Hello, this is Misha Dichter. He was lovely. He was so happy that someone was interested. So what I'm saying is this kind of openness and letting elements just start being attracted together, like a kind of magnetization around the story. It's it's in spirals. It grows from the center. That's kind of my middle process. And then I'm going to say that my third step is what I call the knife. It's when I have to go in and get rid of stuff that sounded great when I was starting, but is not going to work. I had to eliminate an entire timeline. And the dog, I totally love the dog. The dog had to go. And so this is the knife stage. And so there's this kind of dance between something very open and immersive and intuitive, letting everything in, and then a kind of rigor that says, And then, so I would say that my fourth stage is stepping away from the first draft, breathing, and you have to really look at it with fresh eyes. This book went through many, many versions, and I will tell the story later about how Susanna came to be the person that she needed to be. She wasn't right in the first few drafts. So it's very much for me, I'm a perfectionist. I mean, I get obsessed with, I'm very, but at the same time, it can't be completely technical. There has to be this back and forth with something very open and listening to what my characters need me to do. So that's a messy process.
Well, that is fascinating. And I looked up, I was thinking, I was going to say, the Eat, Pray, Love lady. I had to look it up real fast. Elizabeth Gilbert writes about that in her, I'm blanking on the name of her book that she talks about that, but it's after Eat, Pray, Love. But it is exactly that. Yeah. This attraction that happens, and then the process, and then trusting the process, trusting the sort of the information. You had the spark, and then things start pulling together, and then all of a sudden you have these moments, this wonderful experience of you have someone calling you on the phone. It develops a life of its own.
Actually, can I make one other little tiny comment, which was very important, which is letting other people in that you trust. I had a very amazing mentor who'd give me a lot of tough love. And she said to me, it's not working. You need to love your characters more.
Interesting.
So there's this moments when you need someone to give you a little, to tell you what you're doing wrong. And
absolutely. Somebody you trust and who will tell you gently, but directly. Exactly. So you have to be open to that. Yeah. Even if you're mad a little while, you have to. Okay. Thank you, Barbara. This is so interesting to hear these things. Okay, Susan.
So this book, it's my 13th.
Mhm.
It took me, and my second memoir, and it took me 8 years on and off, working as a full-time freelance writer and renovating houses at the same time. And the process, it's a memoir, and so it comes from my life. And it's the story of the 2.5 years that my late husband and I spent journeying with his brain cancer. At the same time, I was taking care of my mother, who was dying as well. So it's a story about really, as I said, rising to our best selves in the worst times we can imagine. And because I'm a scientist first, this was a very messy book to write. I had too much data. I'm a journaler, and I also blog, and I have a fairly big blog following, especially for the journey with Richard's brain cancer. I had a lot of people follow that journey. And so I had almost too much material. And the hardest part for me was to decide why it mattered, why the story mattered, because it's not a poor me story. It's not that at all. We all have tragic things happen in our lives. It's just part of life. And so for me, I started out and I wrote the whole thing chronologically, and that sucked. Just was super boring. And it was way too much medical detail. So I took it back, read it out loud, which is what I also do for editing. It's super important to me to hear everything I write. Every single thing I write, whether it's a feature article for a national magazine or whatever I read out loud, I have to hear it in my head. So the big struggle I had in my process was between the sort of, to use Barbara's metaphor, the attracting of all the ideas that could go in this story, and that dance with the knife. And I'm really good with the knife. I'm a double Virgo, if anyone knows astrology.
Me too. Oh my God, me too.
And I know tidy. I'm the queen of tidy. And I also I'm a nurture, but I'm super ruthless. It's like, this does not fit. You're out. Sorry about that dog, but you're out of there. So for me, the really tough part was pulling myself out of the personal story, the personal experience, and saying, so why would anybody care? Everybody dies. We all go through dealing with death and aging parents and blah, 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 blah. What matters? And there's a really interesting, for me, it was a really interesting cross-fertilization between the times we're in and this particular story, because the times are hard. This book came out last year in April, as we thought we were getting over COVID, and things were getting better. No, we're in a time of climate change, a time of war, a time of famine, a time of terrible racism and terrible gun violence. So there's a sense in which the story and current events had to really come together in a way that I could move out of the personal story and into the universal story. So for me, I don't know how many major revisions I went through. I would think it was done. I would put it aside for months while I, had a feature article I had to write on a deadline. I would pick it back up again and go, not quite there yet. Or, oh my God, there's a whole layer of meaning I left out. And I would start back from page 1. My process is I literally look at the typed version and I open a new file on my computer and start writing all over again, because otherwise I get caught up in the draft I want to revise.
Oh, wow. Really?
So I literally start typing all over again. And that led to some really interesting things. And the biggest for me, I don't let people read my writing. I know I should, but I don't, and I'm a super perfectionist. And the biggest thing that happened to me was this marvelous synchrony. I had a residency at the Women's International Studies Center in Santa Fe. Wonderful, wonderful residency. And one of my casita mates was a playwright, Diz McGee. She's in Australia now working on a new play, but we were together in a casita for a month in Santa Fe. And we were talking to each other about our work. And one night over dinner, she said, what's your favorite part of the story in Bless the Birds? And I said, well, it's the honeymoon my husband and I took at the end of his life. We met in grad school. He already had a small daughter. We were both busy. We either never had time or we never had money to take a honeymoon in our 29 years together. And so when he was dying, we decided we would take our favorite drive from central Colorado to the Pacific coast, to my brother's house in Washington, and down the coast and back. It's about 4,000 miles, which sounded really good in our living room. But let me tell you that going on the road as a guy whose right brain is impaired for 4,000 miles is an adventure. Some of it was pretty damn funny. Some of it wasn't. But that story of that road trip was, it's my favorite part of the whole story. And Diz said, it's a movie. And she offered to set me up with a playwright. And I did work with a playwright for a while, but the response of everybody who read the treatment was, well, they're old and he dies at the end, so why would we care?
Ooh.
What Diz's focus on the trip we took told me was, oh, there's a story within a story. And so the structure of the memoir became the chapters each start with a day in that road trip. And then they wind their way back through our lives and how we became who we were and how we created the life we had when he saw birds and was diagnosed with brain cancer. And why we responded to that diagnosis the way we did. But each chapter starts with a place, a mileage on the road trip, and then a vignette from the trip. And that is what really broke the whole thing open and gave me a structure that worked for the first time. So I don't have a good process to say. I can't say, you know, oh, I just do this. I don't. I'm the classic, is it John Irving who said about fiction that it's like driving a car in the fog at night with your headlights on. You can only see as far as the beam of your headlights, but you can make the whole drive that way.
That's right.
That's me feeling my way in the fog. Always. That's my process with all of my books. I'm like, yeah, well, some people have a great process. I just have feeling my way in the fog.
Well, I have been in a writing in progress group with you for those 8 years, I believe.
All those years.
Yeah. And it was very interesting to watch you and your process and to see that you would go deeper and deeper. It's like you would stop and you would write it, then you would stop, then you would open it, then you would go deeper, then you would close it, then you would open it, go deeper, and that over and over and over. And then finally it was as if there was this
instantly, it was an instant story. It just took
a breakthrough, which was that honeymoon. And that created the structure, because I think structure is often a struggle of how to make a choice on structure.
It's a struggle with memoir, you know, because we do use the tools of fiction in memoir. We are looking for that narrative arc. We're looking for that character development. We're looking for the you know, obstacles on the way that shape the characters and the outcome of the story. But it's true. It's not something we can invent.
That's right.
The problem is you have to stick to what actually happened.
Yeah. You can't throw in some zany thing that would lighten it up a little bit. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much. This is all extremely informative, and I love that. You're sort of riffing, you know, with each other, but at the same time, there's but I don't do it that way. I mean, I think it's helpful to get the whole range of experience in writing. And it sounds like we at least got 3 versions of it. I wish we had enough time that everybody could answer every question, because I really am curious about the answers that Marita and Michelle would give. But we are now going to ask Marita and Michelle what motivated you two to write your books. Okay. And so let's go, Marita, why don't you start that out? And then Michelle, you can go from there. Okay. Go ahead, Marita.
Well, this is a book that grew out of a kind of a health scare. The last weekend in 2019, I felt like I was having a stroke, but I wasn't having a stroke. My blood pressure was high. So I went to the emergency room. They did a battery of tests, and my blood pressure after 12 hours in the emergency room went down. And so they sent me home. So I ultimately sought out my general practitioner, and he did an MRI. And the MRI revealed that at some time in the distant past, I had actually 2 silent strokes. Now, silent strokes are very, very common. And you can have a stroke while you're walking, while you're talking, while you're sleeping. You lose brain cells, but you're not aware of it. And so when I found out that I'd had these 2 silent strokes, because I had constructed a very indelible image of myself as very strong, it really kind of shook me. As background, my mother died of a stroke when I was 21. My father died of a heart attack when I was 23. So I inherited from both of them, heart attack and stroke. And I saw them die fairly early before they got to see me realize my life as a writer, which they had done an enormous amount to prepare me to be. And I decided I wasn't going to go out like that. So in my 20s, I started walking, cardio, meditating. I'd go to the psychiatrist if I needed to. I watched my health. I did everything right. So I left my doctor's office feeling that, oh my God, my body failed me. But actually, no. The fact that I had been so religious in terms of my health care prevented those 2 strokes from being lethal. So then I thought about the whole issue of health. And this was 2020. We were all in lockdown. George Floyd had been murdered. The whole issue of mental health was all over the place. And so I said, is there a story here? I felt myself being claimed because I don't choose my stories choose me. And I felt that I was being claimed to tell something. So I went on social media and I saw this very vibrant conversation about the strong Black woman complex, this idea that Black women, which grows out of our enslavement, that is, as enslaved people, of course, it was impossible for us to show uncertainty, to show tears, to show vulnerability. We had to tap down so much, and we had to be physically strong and emotionally strong to survive. So each generation of Black women, has raised Black women to be strong. But I saw this vibrant conversation going, hey, we just saved democracy. We need to sit down. Let's take a break. Stop asking Black women to do everything. So I said, there is a story here. So I started thinking about how I had grown from strong Black woman to new age strong Black woman, thinking about my health, prioritizing my mental health. And I decided to write the book as what I call a communal memoir. I've written 2 other memoirs in this same way. I said, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm a storyteller. So this is a fascinating story. So I combined interviews with women who had gone through hurt and talked with them about how they'd healed. They told me amazing stories about going through therapy. And the reason those stories are so important is because I wanted to destigmatize therapy as an option. It remains to some extent stigmatized in the larger society and is definitely stigmatized to some extent in the Black community. So I talked to them, I talked to therapists, I talked to doctors. And because I'm a storyteller, I allowed myself to be very original in the way I approach this. For example, one of the chapters is called Reimagining the History of My Heart. And I thought about the sheroes we have, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks. What would they have said if we had allowed a space where they could talk about their pain and their vulnerability? So I have these monologues where I channel them talking about not just their strength, but their vulnerability. And I also wrote about how important healing stories are. My mother told me when I was 13, I was going to write a book. My father's bedtime stories to me were about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. So I was getting, as a child, aspirational, affirmative stories that inoculated me to some extent against racism. And the book actually ends with me writing an essay about Their Eyes Are Watching God, and how that classic story, in that story, I realized after thinking about it for the umpteenth time, is that Janie Crawford is a new age strong Black woman, because through the story, she learns to prioritize joy. She prioritizes what she needs. She sets boundaries. And so it's a book that's kind of like a quilt.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, wow. Well, that's another one, man. I've got my summer reading all set here. I mean, that's quite fascinating. And it is coupled, I'm sure, with all the news, the news media information about particularly African-American women not being treated.
Yeah, sure. There are the statistics in the book. I mean, African-American women are disproportionately affected by stroke, heart attack. But I did not want the book to be a book about negative statistics.
Right.
So I combined that information with aspirational stories of healing. And I think that's why so many women found themselves in the book. And I've been very gratified because Johns Hopkins Medical reached out to me, and I've started doing virtual residencies every couple of months, talking to staff and everybody about mental health and setting boundaries. So it's a very exciting time.
Very exciting time and very important information to be shared for all of us. We can all benefit from that. And I'm struck too with the Mary Shelley. I mean, there's that sort of balance going there, and her own this book's discovery of how she was taking care of herself in ways that her mother could guide her through it. And it sounds as if there was, I love the fact that I'm very curious about those you're talking about these monologues that you were writing about these heroes of ours. I can't wait to read those. Really, really interesting and innovative. A very interesting way to approach that.
Because one of the publishers that my agent sent it to initially said, well, what we'll do is we'll combine Marita with a well-known therapist who has 1 million followers on Twitter, and we'll do. And I'm not going to say what I said, but I said, no, we're not going to do that. Actually, we're not going to do that. Yeah. And it was important for me to affirm that I could tell this story because essentially it is a story. It's not about how we're twice as likely to die of heart attack. It's about creating a new version,
a new paradigm. Right. Right. Well, wonderful. And I'm glad you were strong and were able to do that, because not everybody can do that. So there are many who would fold under that pressure.
And my publishers, Mango, did very well by the book. They believed in it, and very happy with them.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Michelle, let's hear about you.
Thanks. So this is my 6th book, and I only know how to write nonfiction. I did dabble 10 years ago into fiction and brought it to my writing group. I'd written about 100 pages of a novel, which said things like, "Stop it," he said haltingly. And the people in my writing group, who are really well-known and accomplished authors, Elizabeth Berg and Nancy Horan, were in my writing group then. And I remember Elizabeth said to me, maybe something could happen in the book. Everyone's just talking to each other. So I wanted to have a book of essays, because I'm an essayist and I've been publishing essays for, longer than my journalism career, because I published them in 17 magazine when I was a teenager.
Oh, wow.
So I had the brilliant idea of just collecting all the essays that I've written. And that's a terrible idea, according to an agent and a publisher, because my agent said, well, why would someone buy a book when they can just Google you and find all your essays? So you have to write new ones. I write essays all the time. So I the essayists I admire, like Joan Didion and Mary Carr and so many other voices that I really aspire to be 10% as great at. I wanted to have a book of my nonfiction essays that expressed what this time of life is like. I'm 64 years old, and I wanted to write about the mission of finding meaning. And the timing of it was, the book came out in October 2020, but as you know about deadlines, my book was due, edits were due February 1, 2020, and then my editor pushed it to May 2020. And what happened between February and May was the pandemic.
Right.
And so the book felt completely superfluous and silly and dumb, because who cares?
Right.
Who cares what an old white woman has to say about anything? So what? Right. So then I was highly motivated to make it more relevant. So the book is in 3 parts about work, life, and meaning. And I was afraid to write this one chapter that I call privilege. And I write about what it means to be a woman of privilege in this time of great injustice and disruption, where and what can I do about it, and what is my role there, and how can I just not be extra? So that was a motivation to do something meaningful and to look candidly with honesty and transparency at my life. I write about growing up and work and the mission of making your life be about something larger than yourself. So that was the motivation, after I figured out that you can't just cut and paste things that have already been published, because nobody wants that. So it was motivation to get great new ideas out, and yeah, it worked.
Well, and it sounds as if the one of the very good things that came from the pandemic for you is that it really did push you to rethink and go deeper and be willing to take those risks, which I'm sure were pretty scary, and to get it on the page. So good for you. Good for you. And I'm very pleased to hear the essay. I write essays, so I love the idea that you could actually write essays and get a book and publish a book with it. But I do appreciate that you got to take some risk with it, right? No cutting and pasting. Got to get in there, because the wisdom that you bring to the page at this moment is very different than those different times in your life. And so there's a layering that certainly would, and I'm sure that's true for every writer at every age, actually. But that's the beauty of getting older. You bring a whole lot with you, which hopefully. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we have this question. What are some surprises that came with writing your book? Okay, let's see. Michelle, you just spoke, so let's go with Kathleen.
Sure. Okay. Well, I can think of 2 major categories. One I would call metafictional, things I hadn't really planned on. So I didn't know that Mary's creature in Frankenstein would start appearing and talking to her. Yeah. So he shows up, and she tells him, well, you came about from a dream that I had. And he says, what are dreams? Can you give me dreams? And she tells him, oh, you go to sleep and you see visions in front of you. Oh, I'd really like to have dreams. Well, no, I can't do that for you. And he asks her about getting a mate. And she said, well, I'll have to talk to Victor Frankenstein and see what he says. So he keeps showing up, and he's disheveled. But I started thinking about this, and I've taught Frankenstein a lot. So it always seemed to me that the creature, and I hate calling him a monster because he doesn't even begin as a monster, he's her creation, that he is her. He's her.
Oh, interesting.
Everything that he reads, because he's a really fast learner, right? He reads Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. He reads Plutarch's Lives. He reads Goethe. he is Mary Shelley. He was abandoned by his creator, just like she was. And so she
Oh.
has so much sympathy for him.
Mhm.
And of course, he's going to appear in the novel and start
Yeah.
talking to her.
Mhm.
The other kind of Gothic elements, which kind of makes sense, of course, you know, given that she had written Gothic fiction, some of it. The fact that in my novel, Mary Wollstonecraft also haunts her. And of course, Mary Shelley wanted to know her mother. She read her mother's writings on Mary Wollstonecraft's grave with Percy with her. And so
You mean literally on her grave?
Yes,
Oh,
that really
my.
happened.
Mhm.
But in my novel, Mary
Mhm.
Wollstonecraft comes out of her grave, unwinds her shroud,
Oh, wow.
talks to her daughter, counsels her daughter about love, that you shouldn't just love with your heart and lose your head in the
Mhm.
process, because that happened to her and some love affairs that she had before she met Godwin. She counsels her about writing. So she's there literally with her. And Mary Shelley, when she eventually becomes Mary Shelley much later, she is talking to her mother, dreams about her mother. Her mother's haunting her all the time in a good and kind of sometimes bad way. Some other things that surprised me when Mary Wollstonecraft is dying, I have her friend Fanny Blood, whom she was helping while Fanny died in childbirth. I have her appear at the bedside along with Mary Wollstonecraft's mother, and they're trying to call her to the other side. Come with me now. And she says, no, I'm not ready. I'm 38 years old. I haven't accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. Some of the research surprised me too. I knew that Mary and Percy read writings on her mother's grave, but I didn't know they made love on the grave. They did.
Wow.
They did.
You know, reading can have that effect on you, I guess.
So, yeah, that was really an interesting thing to find out. I also didn't know that Shelley threatened to kill himself. He broke into the Godwins' home. He had a pistol with him, and he said, Mary has to go with me. And he holds the pistol up to his head, and Godwin tells him to get out or he's going to call the constable. And then Mary decides, I'm going. And she goes off and gets her stepsister, Claire, to go with her. I didn't know who the antagonist would be in my novel. I quickly realized as I was doing research that one would be Lord Byron, who was their friend, but he didn't think that a little girl, an 18-year-old girl, could write such a grisly, frightening tale. So he's like the gentleman that I met recently. He said, oh, are you sure it wasn't Percy that wrote it? Her stepsister, Jane, who later called herself Claire and became Byron's lover, she is also an antagonist in the novel. In my novel, she was a rival for Percy's affection. She wanted Percy Shelley.
Oh, wow.
And she tried everything. And even after he died, and this is true, and I included it, she wore widow's weeds.
Oh, my heavens.
After he died. And Mary, in my novel, she tells her, get out, take it off now, right now. And then in my novel, she disappears and they never see each other again. And other major antagonist is her stepmother, Mrs. Claremont, who was their neighbor that Godwin married. And she's the one who, at the beginning of my novel, just hands her the forbidden knowledge. Here's the memoir about your mother. Learn about your mother's affairs. Learn about how she tried to kill herself several times. Here, read all of it. And so, yeah, those antagonists just kind of appeared through the research and through the writing as I got to know them more, and I was understanding who, as people were talking about those obstacles. I think Susan had mentioned that the people that, in this case, would try to get in her way, fulfilling what she wanted to do. So those are the major things that I think surprised me.
Well, I love I love this whole Gothic side of that, and these ghosts appearing, and then that extra little bit of info, of course, the reading and the lovemaking on the grave. These are all things I wouldn't have actually anticipated knowing
Well,
about,
they
but
were the original hippies.
yeah, they
So,
apparently were.
They were vegetarians too, so.
Oh, well, there you go. That's what happens, when you're just eating vegetables. Okay, thank you. I continues to become even more fascinating as you're talking about it. Barbara, do you want to go next?
Sure.
What
it's hard to-
surprises that came to you when you were writing your book?
It's hard to top all that. But
I know that's pretty hard to top. I know it's true.
But I think in the interest of time, as I see how late it is, I'll just talk about one thing, which is that, as I mentioned, I had just sort of started returning to the piano, and the book had been through several versions. There was something wrong with it. I actually was going to have it published, and I pulled it. I knew it wasn't right because the character Susanna, because she had this resentment about being given away.
Mm.
She had this chip on her shoulder, and she was kind of bitter and angry, and I didn't know what to do. So I was at a summer piano intensive, which I'm actually going to again next week for the first time since COVID. And I was there, and I realized that you can't play the piano unless you're full of generosity
Mm.
and joy and love.
Mhm.
And she couldn't have made the kind of
Yeah.
music if she was so angry. And I learned that not through my mind, not through trying to revise it, but through my own self, through my body, through my experience in a
Interesting.
domain that had nothing to do with editing or writing. It was like being in another medium, being in water instead of air or something.
Mhm.
And a different part of me realized that, and I made the connection with the book. I wasn't thinking about writing that week at all. And I understood. So what I would tell people later was that I had to become a better musician, not a better writer,
Yeah, a better
in
musician.
order to make the book what it needed to be. And I would
Mhm.
never have predicted that
Yeah.
going into this story. So again, I just see that one thing, because I think that the message for all of us is that sometimes what you need is outside of
Yeah.
language. It's outside of just editing and revising and doing all those writer-ish things.
Mhm.
You have to go into another part of yourself and listen to what that
Yeah.
is, what is needed from that. And I think that's just, I know writers who are painters, knitters, gardeners. So that's kind of my message.
Mhm.
I'll leave it there because I know it's already 8 o'clock, and I'll defer down to Michelle.
Okay. But I think that is so interesting, and that you received that insight in a completely unexpected way, in a different place than you weren't even looking for it, and all of a sudden you had that moment.
Yeah.
You
I'm
had the
I'm a PS person. So here's my PS, which is that the sonata Susanna plays is kind of too hard for me, but I was determined to learn the second movement, which is always technically the easiest. And I felt like I owed it to her to be able to play that for her before the book was published. And I did.
Very good. Very
I'm
good.
done.
So you're pushing yourself in this other area as well. Yeah, motivated by your character.
Yes.
Yeah, that speaks to the connection that you end up feeling with these characters. I like that PS, by the way. Very nice. Okay, Michelle, how about you?
I jumped the shark already and talked about the surprise of the timing of this, and how I had to add in, the relevance of the moment in mid 2020. But I think what most surprised me about writing this book, and I've written 2 memoirs, an academic book, a book on writing, a short ebook, and this book, was that I felt really exposed and vulnerable, thinking that it was a book about nothing. right? And I'm not a shrinking violet. I write op-eds in the New York Times and Washington Post and CNN and USA Today. And I was a contributing columnist at the Chicago Tribune for 15 years. So I'm used to being out there and getting hate mail and people, you're wrong, you're crazy, stupid, I mean, and death threats and all that. But as this is about me and about what I think. And I would always tell my students, you cannot write off the top of your head. But what I did, because that's just ridiculous. Who cares what you just say, just to say it? But what I discovered was that you can go from the top of your head to the bottom of your heart. And the farther you dig into your own vulnerability and trying to get to the details of your own life, it ceases to be about you. Yeah. It's about humanity. And it becomes universal through that process of diving down. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the fear really motivated me to not make this just a ridiculous throwaway, I mean, it is humorous in parts, but even tragedy is humorous in part. And so, yeah, I think that's what was maybe the biggest surprise, mm-hmm. was mm-hmm. how I felt about the process and what it drove me to do.
Yeah. And that they were really laying yourself bare on the page, it sounds
sure.
like, which was different than the other writing you had done. This was a more
sure.
laying bare. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, my memoirs were extremely heartfelt and mm-hmm. hard to write about. And my first was in 99 and my second was in 2015. So a lot had happened and I did bear quite a bit significantly, but yeah, this didn't have, one single mood or moment or theme.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This was just ideas.
Mm-hmm. Here's me, right? All
yeah.
over the place. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable like that. I think that's a real key in writing. That connects your writer and helps them to also feel with your reader and helps them to feel the permission to feel their own vulnerability. So very nice. Now we have the next question is the obstacles. What unexpected obstacles you encountered? And this is going to be Susan and Marita. Susan, I saw you nodding very much with the questions of vulnerability that Michelle was describing. Do you want to go first on this one?
I don't know that this is an obstacle, but it's a continual learning for me. I came to writing from science and I've had to learn to write. And I've done that by reading the writers I love critically, not meaning in a critical way, but meaning mm-hmm. reading them in a meta way that says, why does this work for me? And I also read writers I don't like that way. And so I've learned a lot about writing along the way, but the biggest thing that's been hard for me, and it's partly cultural, I come from Northern European cultures. I'm partly Scots, partly Scandinavian, which makes me, I think, wholly Celtic, which is a little frightening. But I come from people who are much better at standing back and observing than good at being personal and emotive. So I both come from science, which is not an emotive culture at all, and from Northern European cultures that are not emotive. And so, and I'm writing memoir. Mm-hmm. So I've had to learn just what Michelle was talking about, which is that it's not the me that I know now, that knows what I know now, that matters. It's what I've learned along the way and how the things that have been tough and the times I've been low, and letting that me out in public has been probably I've been my biggest obstacle
Mhm.
in writing that kind of thing. I would much prefer to present the together, self-aware,
Sure. Mhm.
wise woman me
Mhm.
than the woman who, when her late husband stepped out onto the 5 lanes of
Right.
the street that runs through the neighborhood in San Francisco we were walking through, and I can't think of the name of it, but he stepped out into traffic as we were walking across San Francisco to our daughter Molly's apartment, just right out into traffic without looking, and nearly got hit by a bus. And I'm about 5'5.5" and about 115 pounds, and he was about 6'2" and 180 pounds. And I yanked my brain damaged, terminally brain cancer husband back onto the curb and said, "You can't fucking walk out into traffic. I didn't bring you this far to get you killed in traffic." And then I went, yell at the brain damaged guy while you're at it. It was just like, okay. That's in the book, because
Sure.
that's who I was in that moment. And
Mhm.
that's
And that's real. That's
as
real.
much as I was trying to
Mhm.
rise to be my best self and live with love in this time of dying we were going through.
Mhm.
There were times when he scared the snot out of me, when he did stuff and I'd just be like, oh, I'm so terminally embarrassed. Like, we get out of the car in this little state park in Eastern Oregon that was a favorite place of ours, and he immediately unzips his pants and starts to whip out his penis right in front of the family that's eating at the picnic table. And I'm like, you can't be in public.
And in front of a family.
And he looked at me, my brilliant husband, whose left brain was undamaged, the logical side, and went, that makes sense. Zipped himself up and went behind a tree and peed. And I'm like, oh my God, are we going to make this?
Mhm.
So for
Mhm.
me, letting that person out on the page
Mhm.
was the biggest obstacle, was admitting how fallible I am, how this hair was red before he saw birds and got brain cancer. And I have the temper to match. It was letting that me out onto the page, as
Mhm.
well as me who could see the meaning in the way we behaved on our journey and in the choices we made.
Right.
So
Mhm.
I was my own biggest obstacle, and that's always true in my life. I'm always my own biggest obstacle.
Well, I think I said something just this morning to my husband about that, about myself. So yeah, apparently it is a universal truth, or at least between the two of us.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that is one of the big challenges of writing memoir, and laying yourself bare on the page, and knowing that it's not going to always be attractive, and you're not always going to be put, your best self is not necessary. And if it is, it's boring. The only way that it's
Exactly.
actually interesting
Exactly.
is if you are honest and talk about, I'm surprised you didn't swear more, not less, anyway. But I think that's an important reminder for everyone.
That's
how
a
important.
truism in memoir, though. It's not the self that we've figured out that people care about.
No,
It's the fallible.
that's right. It's
struggling
flawed self.
that we all learn from that.
Yeah. Yeah. The other is not, it doesn't have as much information for us as that one. At least, it's nice to have role models, however. So that's a different, Marita, I think in your case, with the role models that you were laying out, including yourself, in your story, is also very informative. It's a different kind of writing than this kind of laying yourself. I mean, I have not read your book, so I don't know that.
Actually, no, it's a lot of the book is memoir.
Is it?
Yeah. I write, like I opened the book talking about going to the doctor and finding out that I had these strokes. I go back and write about growing up as a strong Black woman. So there is quite a bit of memoir, but the question was about challenges
or obstacles.
I think the first one was that next year will be the 40th anniversary of the publication of my first book, and Strong Black Woman was my 20th book. And so my agent and I were not prepared for the book to be received by the publishing industries. Oh, we love you, Marita, but we're gonna have to pass on this. And because I'd been with a big publisher. And what happens is that when you have a 40-year career and I'm going to speak Franco here, and you're not a literary celebrity, that happens and you age out. And I mean, publishers will simply look at you, well, the money we give to you, we can give to a younger writer and work with them for 30 years, you've had your day. So there was a whole thing around that and my ego. Once my very smart agent, who has been my agent for 40 years, found this great publishing company, which was smart enough to get the book, and in fact said, we don't want this book, we want to republish one of your earlier books, Saving Our Sons, which he thinks speaks to this moment. I said, okay, now I can breathe. So there was a whole ego thing around, you don't do this to Marita Golden. Yeah. Yes, you do. So then the other obstacle was in terms of writing about myself and my family, because if I'm going to write about the strong Black woman, I wrote about myself, my challenges. And there's a part in the book where I write about a family situation, a family secret, which was an open secret, the family. And as someone who's written memoir, this is all the thing you're always wrestling with. That story is a family story, but it is also my story. It belongs to me. So in writing about the strong Black women in my family, I wrote about my mother and the fact that she had adopted my sister, who was 10 years older than me. She adopted her before I was born. And the big lie in the family was that she wasn't adopted, because in those days, in the 40s and 50s, you adopted children and you lied to them and told them you're not adopted, because the belief was that it would shatter them if they knew they were adopted. So my sister, 10 years older than me, grew up feeling an enormous amount of anger at my mother because of this lie. And so here's my mother feeling that she's being strong, doing the right thing. Here's my sister being damaged by the lie. And then there's me in the middle of this, which I have to uphold the lie as a member of the family.
Right.
And that lie, in some ways, really deeply impacted my sister in some very negative ways. And I write about that in the book. I write about how, as she is dying, we had our most tender, loving moments. We said things to each other. And that's why dying is so interesting. People think dying is this inert thing, but dying is very active, very energetic. And that's why people have this spiritual release where they can say things that they couldn't say before. And so I wrote about all of that and how this need to be strong and this need to keep this lie going. And my sister had 5 boys and was the quintessential strong Black woman. She became a single parent. And when we had her memorial, one of the persons said, oh, Jean, you could go to Jean with your problems. She would listen to you. She was like a mother to all of us. But I never knew what was happening with her. She was a typical strong Black woman. So I gave myself permission to write about that open family secret, which was held as a lie even unto her memorial, because that's what families do. So I wrote her son a letter, and I told him how, as she was dying, we had become sisters in the deepest of ways, and that I had wanted to write about. And he said, he wrote me back, he called me, and he said, thank you. I knew about that story. My mother told me about that story. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for writing it. And this is the struggle, that you have when you're writing memoir. Yes, this is my story, but will I hurt somebody's feelings?
Exactly.
But as long as I always tell my students, as long as you're writing with love, you're not responsible for what else people feel. So the book is deeply memoir, even as there are statistics and interviews with doctors. So that was a challenge. And I felt that I was honoring my sister by sharing that, because in that section of the book, there's so much tenderness and love. Everybody who reads it is deeply moved. So look, whatever issues the family has, too bad, So those are my 2 struggles.
No, I can see that. Yeah. And that's always a question when you're writing a memoir and you've got these moments and you have these people and you're, and there's that, what do I do? How do I handle this? And every family has those lies, right? They all have those those places, and they deeply affect everybody in the family. The unspoken truly does. So, and how wonderful that you were able to talk to her son and have that close connection with him, and that she had already told him, and that you were validating it. That's yeah. That's a lesson in itself. That's a life lesson about family and dynamics and taking risk and getting it on the page. So thank you for that. We are very tight on time. We have 9 minutes left. And so I think if we could just have a quick, I don't know. I mean, and tell me how you feel about it. I can skip your publisher question. You want to just skip that one? Okay, let's do that. But I do want to know how you felt when you found out about your award. Okay. And so if we can just do that fairly quickly, then we'll have just a few minutes where we can just skim through these questions super fast. Okay. Is that okay with everybody? All right. So let's just start. Marita, let's start with you, since you're right up there in the corner for me.
Well, I was very gratified, and my publishers submitted the book. So that was an endorsement of their belief in me and in the book. And from way back, I was a fan of May Sarton, and I read her poetry, I read her work. And so she was somebody that I knew. So it meant a lot to get this award, in her name.
And your publisher, you can just say who your publisher is. Mango. You had mentioned, and you had a good experience with them. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Barbara, why don't you go from there?
Well, I just think, like everybody, it was just a dream come true. But there's actually a funny story. When I got the call, it just had some number I'd never heard. So I didn't answer because I don't answer. So then I heard the first part of the message. She said, well, I need to discuss with you Story Circle Network. What have I done wrong? So I called her back. And then I told her that, then I got excited, and I told her the reason I hadn't answered is because I thought it was somebody telling me that my car warranty was about to expire.
Exactly.
So at the end of our phone conversation, she said, oh, by the way, your car warranty is about to expire.
Very funny. Very funny.
Yeah, okay. I almost hung up.
Yeah,
because you're so paranoid about the
absolutely. Yeah. I don't ever answer any of those. They would need to text me first. That's how I answer those. Okay. Go ahead, Michelle. What about you?
Well, I was just thrilled. Gilda Radner was such a brilliant, creative, unique mind and presence, and growing up, watching her, and then seeing all that she accomplished in her short life, and being just humbled by having two of us connected in the same sentence, and with this incredible honor. I just am thrilled, especially because humor is really, it's difficult. We all know people who think they're funny. Right. So it's really marvelous to be awarded this, and I'm exceptionally grateful.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Susan?
I've won other awards for other books. I'm sure, like all of us here. But to me, an award, first name for May Sarton, as Marita said, I came of age reading her work, and so admired her as an independent, crusty, opinionated, not afraid to put it on the page woman.
Right.
And it was a big heart. And so that just the naming of the award, the fact that it honors May Sarton was huge to me, but also Story Circle Network is really special to me. I was a contributor to one of Story Circle's, the University of Texas Press anthology, What Wildness Is. women writing about wildness. That just was, it's a beautiful, beautiful anthology. And I was so honored. I knew nothing about Story Circle. I came to the release event and met Susan Albert and met Theresa May at University of Texas Press, who then published my first memoir. So I have this long connection with Story Circle as this organization who really has helped me nurture my voice and has nurtured my voice. So it's just a huge honor to have Story Circle recognize me this way. I just, because it's an organization that explicitly works to nurture and honor women's voices and stories, that means a whole lot to me. It's just a lot more meaningful than some other awards. And I'm fortunate that Bless the Birds is also honored in other ways, but this is a really, it's close to my heart.
Well, wonderful. And we're thrilled, of course, as one of our Story Circle writing sisters over here. Of course, longstanding. In fact, you were mentioned, we had a big event for Susan this weekend, a board event, and you were mentioned in terms of that anthology very fondly. So you were remembered. Kathleen?
Well, like as others have said, I didn't answer the phone either because it said Portland, Oregon, and I don't know anybody there. Now, I was waiting to get my oil changed, and then I listened to the voice message, and they told me, well, I guess you know why I'm calling you from Story Circle Network. And I was just astounded. I thought, no way, I won. I knew I was a finalist of the 4 on the short list, but I really, really never expected to win. So that's just amazing and wonderful. And as other people have said, I also read May Sarton when I was in graduate school, loved her work. And I also loved her writing process. So I remember reading Journal of Solitude, and where she describes her time in the morning writing, or maybe I have it backwards, probably writing in the afternoon and gardening in the morning. That makes more sense because it'd be hot. But whatever, she divided her time. So I do the same thing now. I write in the morning, I play music in the afternoon. And yeah, it was just a thrill, and still is, to have won this.
Totally.
Very grateful.
Wonderful. I just realized I'd muted myself. And we are delighted that your books are the winners. And we are so pleased that you were able to come and share some of your wisdom with us this afternoon. It's very helpful. And I'm getting lots of response. I do know that one of the questions, Kathleen, was, what is your instrument?
2, actually. I took up playing the violin when I was still a faculty member, just for fun. And my granddaughter's 14, and she's way ahead of me now. I mean, but she's been studying Suzuki at Crucial School in Iowa City, and she's amazing. So I try to keep up with her, and I play guitar. I play piano too, and I'm a singer.
Say, oh, well, you're a musician in many ways. Very good. And then we have, I think Marion wrote, Barbara, I have a few funny stories about composers that you might not know and might like to hear. Let me know if you would like to hear them.
Sure.
So that's Marion Hunt.
Email me. Yeah.
Email her, she says.
Sure.
And Sharon Lovejoy wrote, I'm interested in their publishers and if they're satisfied with them and the way they have been treated and honored. So I think, Marita, we have determined that you were very happy with yours. If you want to, and I think that will probably have to be our last question. And that looks like it might be our last question. So maybe if you could just spend just a second on that, each of you, and then we'll let that be the final question. So Barbara, why don't you go?
Well, may I speak for both of us? Susan and I share a publisher. We're both with She Writes Press, which is like a sister organization to Story Circle, because it's by, for, and about kick-ass women who are going to greenlight themselves, as Brooke Warner says. So I think they've been super support. I'm actually about to publish my 3rd book with them. So you don't do something 3 times unless you feel good about it. So I don't know if you want to chime in, Susan, but.
I have an agent, and she sent my memoir proposal out to really great editors at the Big Five. And we got back a lot of comments that were kind of like the comment about the movie treatment. Well, they're old and he dies at the end. So, who cares? But they all said, beautiful writing, wonderful characterization, blah, 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 blah. The kind of lovely rejection letters that on the one hand, you're like, yeah, thanks very much. And on the other hand, you're like, well, okay, I write well. And I knew Brooke from a Story Circle Network conference, actually, and just thought to myself, why am I, at my age, why am I going through this dance? Why don't I just go as she writes? And Brooke had said, you have an open invitation. If you have a book you think would be good for us, please submit it. And so I did. And I learned a couple of things that are important to me to know. And Barbara is not like this. I hate promoting myself. I absolutely hate promoting myself. I understand logically why you do it and how you do it, and I'm just not going to damn do it. So my book is selling by word of mouth. People like Barbara, who are fabulous at it, are like out there doing all this cool stuff. But the wonderful sisterhood at She Writes, we promote each other, which is fabulous. So I've been fortunate.
Okay. All right. Very good. And I think that's important to say, though, as well, is that it is a lot about promotion and figuring those kind of things out. Some people are better at it, some are not, and that's part of the picture. So
I'm actually good at it. I just hate it. And at my stage in life, I don't do stuff I hate.
Well, there you go.
Here we are.
Michelle, what about you?
Yeah, I went with Northwestern University Press here, which to me was kind of wonderful because I am emeritus faculty there. And I thought, that was kind of great. And I love the editor I had. She has since left. And it was difficult. They were really good to me, but it was difficult in the pandemic. I mean, I think I probably did 30 or 40 Zoom book events, but people just leave meeting. They don't have to go stand and have you buy one. But the transaction of the book was so great that I have another book with them that's coming out October 2023, another book of essays called The Time We Have, Essays on Pandemic Living.
Wonderful.
So I like them enough to go back.
Okay. All right. And Kathleen.
I publish with Quedono Press, which is a small press in Brooklyn. It's run by Martha Hoffman and her husband, Bob. She was a historian. And I learned about them from a friend who also had published a novel with them, she was also an academic, or still is. She's much younger than me. Anyway, it was wonderful. Martha is just like the women in my creative girls group. She asks great questions. She just asks for more development sometimes. The scene where I have Mary read the first thing that she wrote during the ghost contest story that they were writing when they were all with Byron, that's where she kept pushing me, do more with this, do more with this. And then it worked out just great. So I highly recommend her. And if she's on here, hi, Martha. Yeah, she's wonderful.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And Marita, did you want to say anything else about your press, since you didn't get to say much?
Well, no, they're very innovative. They're very interested in diverse authors.
Okay.
And I'm working on a workbook as a companion to Strong Black Woman.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
And so I'm very happy with them. And I'm especially happy that they felt the book, Saving Our Sons, Raising Black Children in a Turbulent World, which I wrote back in '95 about raising my son against the violence of that time, spoke to today. So they reissued it with a 50-page resource guide at the end.
Oh, wow.
And so I just feel very supported.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And it is, of course, as timely as it could ever be right now. So
And can I add that I wish it wasn't? I mean,
and I wish you, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's terrible that we haven't made any progress since then, but I don't want to end it in a nasty note.
But well, I'm love to hear all of those wonderful stories about your publishers. And that's important for all of us who are aspiring authors to hear these, you know, these good, wonderful, nurturing relationships that you've had. And so that is the upside of all of that. Thank you all for coming. I'm so appreciate and I'm so proud that you're here among us tonight as your books being these winners. And honestly, it was really, really helpful to hear all of the obstacles, the easy, I mean, the fun parts, the you know, all of the what inspired you, all of these different kinds of aspects of the writing process. You brought a lot of interesting food for thought for all of us, I'm sure, especially me. So I can just speak for myself. So thank you all, and thank you the audience for today. I really appreciate it. We will, these books are available, I'm sure, where all books can be found. Is that true? Can we just say that? Yes. And
you can visit my website, maritagolden.com, and my blog, my upcoming classes.
Perfect.
As well as purchase the books.
Yes.
Could Liz, can you put all of our websites up in the chat? That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And let's see, Liz, are you, I know that she wrote something here at the top, but anyway, and I will
also send them with the recording. Thank you, Liz.
Yes, we will send them definitely with the recording for sure. And everyone here will get the recording. You are able to share it, and please do. We're going to put it on a YouTube link so you could share it anywhere you want. And also, I hope that you all will consider, all of you, attending our September 17th virtual conference. And this will also be aired probably over lunchtime, which is when we did the actual interview last time. And we will again do our best to promote your books there as well. So, and I want to say that the Story Circle Journal, I don't know if you guys can see this. This is the hard copy. This is all about the winners in this particular journal. This is the June journal. It is a really wonderful journal. If you join Story Circle Network, then you have the option of getting it. We're going to send it to all of you just by virtue of being here. And you are all members of Story Circle Network by virtue of I believe even applying for the Sarton in the first place, but especially as our winners. So anyway, thank you for coming. And
thank you. Great to meet
This
you
was
all.
fantastic.
Totally honored to be with you all.
Wonderful.
To be with all of you.
Great meeting all
Have
of you.
my summer reading.
Lot of summer reading, great summer reading. I'm
Absolutely.
excited.
Absolutely.
I'm very
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop our recording as of now. Here we go.